weeks. So again, this is the Ladies Be Architects Platform Developer 1 study group. And I will introduce Kelle. Kelle, do you want to advance a slide?
Sure.
So for those of you who are not aware, first and foremost, we were asking for volunteers to be guest presenters since it's a relatively huge group and a lot to manage, and there's a lot of ground to cover with content. So if anyone's feeling overwhelmed, it's nothing new. There's a lot of us that are feeling that way. It is a lot of content, but we will get through this together. And so actually, Kelle Costa is on the line, and she's our guest presenter tonight. She is a business analyst. She is a 6-time certified Salesforce consultant. She is also a VetForce member. And I had the pleasure of being in the same cohort with Kelle earlier this year when we were participants in the RAD Women Code. So she's one of the alumni, as I am. So thank you, Kelle, for leading us tonight. Folks, again, this is being recorded. The slides are in the Google Drive, so you can access them after this, and I'll put a PDF, and the recording will be shared. And I did get to send out a calendar invite. So next week, I think there's Forcelandia going on, so we will not be meeting, but the following week, August 16th through September 6th, we'll be hitting Thursdays consecutively, and so you will see that on the Google invite that I just sent out. For those of you that have requested access to the Pluralsight 30-day pass, I think I caught up on everyone's request as of maybe 20 minutes ago. So if there's anyone who put in a request and hasn't received a personalized email from me, please reach out to me via email and let me know. And I'll hand it over to Kelle.
All right, thanks, Blanca. Okay, guys, if you guys hear too much noise, I had my headphones on, so I really can't hear my kids or dogs, but there's about 4 kids and 3 dogs running around. Other than that, it's been a crazy week. I was just literally telling Blanca that I just finished this slide about 20 minutes ago. It is a lot of content to cover, but it's not that it's not doable. Just so that I'll let you guys know, so you guys don't get, even though I'm certified 6 times, I actually just started with Salesforce last October. Prior to this, I was a business analyst for SAP and JD Edwards, and I took some time off to take care of the 4 kids. And then when I was looking for something to come back to go back to work, and it wasn't, my skill set wasn't up to speed, and my husband told me about VetForce, because at the time he was working for Salesforce. And I'm like, why didn't you tell me this a while ago? So anyways, and I started getting on Salesforce, and I'm just like, this stuff is cool. It is and readily accessible compared to when I had to learn how to code or do the other system before we end up writing our own documentation. So all of this is doable. It's don't be scared. It's all the documentation's out there. Just it takes a while, and sometimes it takes a little bit longer. This is probably one of the exam that I am spending a lot more time in, just because I think the name kind of scares me a little bit, developer. But other people have done it, so anyways, we can do it too. All right, cool. So for this week, we'll be talking about these topics. The one on top describe how to programmatically access and utilize the schema object. I will not be covering that this week, just because I think if you are learning Apex or getting introduced to Apex for the first time, I honestly think you need to understand that, because if I start using some of the words, it doesn't make any sense. And when I was actually learning it too, I had to go back to some of the my Apex lessons just to see, okay, what are they talking about? But basically, what I gathered from the programmatically accessing the schema object is how to use Apex to get information on the different objects and fields that you have created in Salesforce, doing that programmatically. And that's what I got from that. But hopefully we can cover that later. It's a little weird not being able to hear anybody. Okay. So, okay, yeah, leave your volume on because it is really quiet.
Okay, I can leave myself on mute and I will only interject if needed.
Yeah, interject as much as you can, but it's like I'm like talking to myself here. Okay, so what are the things we're going to cover today? We're going to cover formula fields, roll-up summary fields, use cases for those. What are some of the declarative process and automation features within Salesforce? Why would you use those versus Apex code? And when do you use Apex code, call on Apex code and trigger? And the last requirement is how to declare variables and constant in Apex and how to assign values to them using expression, and describe the different types of data types that Apex use. Okay, formula fields. Formula fields are fields that do calculation on a Salesforce page. So formula fields are read-only, so you cannot come in and edit them. They're very similar to formulas on a spreadsheet. If you think about those, that you have the various functions and operators that you do in the spreadsheet, you can do them there. And if you've ever created a formula field, you know that there's ways you can create simple and advanced formulas. So any question on that? I gotta go find my other screen. One sec.
No questions. Mark just posted a comment. He says, over the past week at events, I've talked to technical architects and solutions designers that this exam was a challenge and good prep, exploring the topics for the common threads they all shared in passing.
Okay, cool. All right, so when you create simple formulas, you can do like basic math operations like add, subtract, divide, and concatenating words or maybe different fields. Advanced formula, I've created some links, and those are in blue once you get the slide deck, range from various functions such as if-then conditions, can add images using hyperlink. Depending on the use cases, formula fields can perform various calculations using various datas. So you don't have to use just numbers. You can use a combinations of numbers and string fields. One of the use cases that we do at work is sometimes we create an account ID. So that would be a number plus the year. So whatever year it is, and so you can concatenate various fields. Formula fields return various value types, including checkbox, date, percent, text, and number. So there's a lot of ways you can do this. The only thing I know that formula fields can't do is dynamic date fields. So you can't use it on those, to do calculations. Fields are calculated within the same objects, and they reference parent object. Okay, so if you think about, they look, what is it, from the same object. So if you have, say, the account object, well, that's kind of a parent. So the contact object, they would reference the information from the account and not the other way around. What would be the other way around? Does anybody know?
Feel free to unmute yourself or to type in the chat box to answer.
What kind of field do you need to look down from the parent to the child? So
roll-up summary.
Exactly, roll-up summary. Awesome.
Woohoo! Great job, Mark.
Okay, so I want to try to make this a little bit more interactive because, like I said, I was learning it, I was putting it together, but I think a lot of you have been reading as well, doing your homework as well. So if you know something, just chime in. And it also tests your knowledge, reinforce it, and help some of us out, and help me out because I might have forgotten something. Okay. They're calculated from the same objects and reference parent object, aka cross formula. So if they go up to a parent, like a contact to a parent, that is considered a cross object formula. And I believe a cross object formula can go up to 10 different relationships. So I guess you can go up like if you're like a great grandchild, you can look up 10 relationship up. So like your great grandparents, you're using the formula field on the child record to look up. Does that make sense? Okay.
Mark confirms, yes. 10 lookup relationship levels.
Right. So you're always looking up to the great grandparents. So think of it that way. Okay, formula field is not used to pull information from child into parent. So it doesn't go the other way around. Like I think, was it Mark that said that was a roll-up summary. So you look from child up, not the other way down. Okay. So when you, okay, we're going into validation rule. Okay, so everybody got a formula field? Any questions on that? Okay, so now then the next rule that we're looking at is the validation rule. Validation rule is useful to verify your data, the data that you're entering, making sure that you're getting clean data in, and also making sure that that it's accurate. So does anybody in their company, what kind of validation rules do you have right now? Can anybody share?
And feel free to unmute yourself. One of the things we decided was not to use YouTube Live because it didn't allow for us to have dialogue. And we really want it to be interactive, so don't hesitate to unmute your line to answer. Or if you want, you can type it in the chat box.
Okay.
Mark says also, cool thought for viewability. Cross-object formula work even if the user doesn't have access to the record on the other object.
I did not know that.
We learn something new every day.
Awesome. Okay, so validation rule, like I said, validation rules are used to verify and enforce business logic before a user saves. So before they hit the save button on the page, the validation rule runs, and to make sure that, okay, if this is what the criteria that you put in. So,
and we have Olivia responded, an address must include a country as
correct.
An example.
Right. So you can use formula fields in validation rules and evaluate the data to return true or false. And if it is true, which means it's invalid, you can have it to create an error message either on top of the page or within the field itself. So you can create the error message. For example, if it's required here, then you can have the error message out here, depending.
And Jennifer responded with another example. based on a certain field being completed, make other fields on the page required.
Yes, that's a very good example. We were actually use a lot of that at my company. So validation rules are case sensitive, and they do impact the API usage, meaning, so when you have a validation rule in place and you're using the data loader, or you're having people enter information from the web to lead, and you have a validation rule on there, so if it doesn't pass, and the data doesn't get picked up, so it just gets kicked out. So you might want, for the information or for the data to come in, you might want to just turn that off, and then clean your data first, and then turn the validation rule off, so that way your data load is more seamless.
And we have another example from Jen Bowen, validation example, preventing a user to use a date in the past on a date field, or moving a stage on an opportunity backwards.
Yes. Wow, that's a good one. Those are good ones. Exactly. Okay, so rules about formula rules. Formula can reference standard, custom, or other formula fields. Formulas can reference the object itself or the fields from the parent object. It cannot reference itself. So it cannot, what it says here, because you're like, what is the one before and after? Maybe it doesn't sound the same. So within the object, it can reference another field within the object, but it cannot reference its own field. That makes sense? So that's what that means there. Fields that are used in formulas cannot be deleted. So if you have two fields that you're referencing in a formula, and you go back and you delete that field, you can't do that, because the admin has to go in and take out the formula first before you can delete those. Cross-object formula can reference fields from, we talked about that, 10 relationship away. The formula fields cannot contain more than 39,000 characters, including spaces and breaks. Formula fields are calculated using SQL on the back end, meaning as soon as the formula is generated, there's the SQL is calculated on the back end already in the system. So you have to make sure that the SQL query that calls on, that looks up, that reference the other field, cannot exceed the 5,000 characters.
And we have a question on that. So Jen asked, has anybody in our group ever hit that character limit? Yes.
Oh,
Mark
wow.
says yes.
So what happens when you do hit that limit?
Jen says, of course, it would be you, Mark. Andrew says, that's one hell of a formula. Melissa says, I agree. Mark says you get an error message. And Mark is in commute, so he doesn't have a headset, so he can only type in answers tonight. But we're glad you can join us, Mark.
All right. Okay, so go ahead.
May I ask a quick question? Mm-hmm. Before we go on, about a formula field referencing itself. Why would you do that? I mean, what would you be trying to accomplish that you'd be like, the formula won't work, and it's because you're trying to reference the field itself?
You cannot do that.
Right. I can maybe chime in on that. This is Jen.
Yeah, Jen, that would be awesome.
So I think what you're trying to say is that if you're writing another formula, you can't reference a different formula field. Is that what that meant?
So formula fields cannot reference itself.
Right.
Oh, right. Okay, so like you can't include the field. Like if you're writing a formula field, you can't actually utilize that field API within its own formula field. It's like formula field inception.
But what situation, what challenge would you be trying to solve by doing that? I mean, why would that be a concern?
If you well, let me see. Let's think of a math problem. So if maybe you calculated to feel like the price. Okay, so I need the total pricing at the average, and so you take two fields that have numbers, and you created a formula field to calculate those two fields, and then probably use that field again to divide it by whatever. So getting the sum and trying to divide it.
Okay, so like if I were trying to put a formula in, say, a price field that I wanted to discount the price, and the standard price was $1,000, and that's what was in that field, but the formula to discount it was that field times 20%. I couldn't do that, right? Is that
right? Yeah, you can't use the field itself to generate another answer. So you can do just calculation on two reference field, and you can't. So for example, if I say A plus B, right, equals C, which is the C is the formula field, right? And within that formula, you said divide by 2 or something like that. So
right?
you're referencing that field again to do, yeah.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
And so we have some comments here from Mark. He says, this particular scenario was a weird if, else, else. If utilizing some very long multi-select pick list values to convert them for use with pre-populating a form solution that use the URL to populate values. New to the formulas and working on one created by another person or copied their bad style refactored with a case statement, then eventually got rid of the MSP.
I'm sorry, I don't know what that means. What did he say? Translate. I didn't understand that.
Yeah, it was kind of lengthy. I'm trying to read it again here too.
Hi, this is Sumant. I can chime in if...
Yeah, great. Thanks, Sumant. Nice to have you on the call tonight.
Sure, thanks. So what Mark says was that particular error that he got when he encountered the character limit. So he was saying why he did that, because or why he got the error is because somebody was using pretty long excuse me, if else statements, like multiple if else statements, and that's why he was just copying the bad code somebody else did, and he got the error. And what he did was he refactored the code using case statement. So case statement is really powerful for formulas. You can like combine a lot of if else statements into one case and just use so if anybody could just type in case formula, you would see what the format is, and if you have not used it, then you should definitely take a look at it.
That's an excellent explanation, Sumath, and thanks, Mark, for throwing that scenario out there for us.
Okay, great. Any more questions on formula fields? Because then we're going to move on to roll-up summary, because we got lots to cover. Okay, roll-up summary fields. Roll-up summary fields are only available on the master detail relationship. So it's the parent calling on the detail records to come up, right? Summarizing selected field on the child object. So there's actually four operators that you can do. You can do, for example, if you have for child records, you can call on the parent, say which one is the least amount, which is the min, which one is the maximum amount of the 4, count the records within those, and you can summarize those 4. The roll-up fields on the parent calculates when the reference of the child is saved. So yeah, so if the roll-up is on the parent, the calculation happens every time you save the child record. And here's a pretty good example of that. The opportunity rolling up to the account. Okay, so you create the roll-ups on the standard object, custom. These are some of the examples. Hang on one second, I gotta close my door. I need you guys to be quiet, okay? Sorry about that.
No worries. Hey, we're all multitasking, so we appreciate you presenting tonight. No worries at all.
Okay, so some of these are examples of the types of roll-up objects that you can do it on, like standard, custom, opportunities and opportunity products, counts and related opportunities, and campaigns, campaign members rolling up to campaigns. Okay, oops. You can also do filters, lookup filters. Do you guys, the lookup filters are, for example, if you're searching on something, you can, I wonder if I have a picture on here. These are the lookup filters. So you can narrow your criteria based on the various fields, the operator, and what value you're looking at. So here's a blank one, and here's an example of some of the filters that you can create on some of these fields that you're looking at, just so that you can save time, narrow your search, and get a more accurate search. So lookup filters narrow search and provide better return data values. Administrators specify the value based on the current record source. Lookup object, you can look up user record, permissions, and role based on, you can filter based on the user record, permission, role, and records directly related to the target object. Okay. So now we're going to move into declarative automation tool. So currently there are, well, this doesn't count as one of them, but I thought it was a pretty cool graphics. So some of the automation tools, what's missing from here that you guys can think of?
Approvals.
Yes, approval process. Anything else?
I don't see anything in the chat box.
I think that was it, though. It was just a test. Okay, we have workflow rules. So workflow rules, if you guys ever get a chance to, David Liu on his website, speaking of David Liu, I think I saw Jennifer Lee on here. By the way, Jennifer Lee, I love your website. I learned so much when I first started. So I want to give a shout out to Jen Lee. But anyway, so if you guys ever get on to David Liu's website, he has a slide deck that I think he did at a conference somewhere. He explained the different types of automation tools, and there's a graph on there, for example, like ease of use versus how flexible it is. So Apex was, if you can visualize it, is at the high end, and workflow is at towards the bottom, where it's easy to use, but it's not, it can only do so many things. So think of workflow rules as your workhorse. Workflow is the main container set of the various workflow instructions that you have. you can only set it on one object at a time, and it gets workflow rule can trigger when an event when a record changes. For example, like if you update or when you create a record. So that's when it gets triggered.
And Mark added a note here. Lots of documentation seems to include approval processes as a special form of workflow rule.
Yes, and that one has it takes on a lot more, I think, criteria as far as routing and things like that. Action can be immediate or time dependent. So you can say, okay, well, once this record is saved, don't, because because it hit a certain criteria, don't run it for, I don't know, a day, or you can set a time limit on that or a time schedule on that. And it also automatically forms the action. So you can create various actions on a workflow rules. For example, if this event happened when the record is changed, this other thing will happen. So it's an if then. It's a simple if then. So does anybody know what are some of the actions that you can create on a workflow rule?
Feel free to unmute your lines to answer what are some of the actions. And you can type them in the chat box as well. So we have Soba says field update, and Jennifer Lee. And Andrew says email. Melissa says email alert. Jen Bowen says use for email alert.
Mm-hmm. So we use it at our company. So when a sales rep puts in a lead, we have a workflow rule that when a sales rep put in a lead, the DSM, which is the district sales manager, gets an email alert that there is a lead that he needs to review and convert. So that's how we use our one of the workflow rules. Okay. So to create a workflow rule, there's basically 4 steps. The first step is you need to identify the object that you're going to create a workflow rule on. Specify when is it gonna trigger? Is it on creation? I think there's 3 options: on creation, and every time it's edited, and on creation and any time it is edited to meet the criteria. Can anybody explain that every and any time? What have you read, and how did you understand that? If you can unmute yourself and.
So for every time, for every might mean that all the users to whom that task may be assigned, everyone has to complete. But for any, it's like one has to accept, and the person who has accepted might have to only complete that task in that context. Right.
So yeah. So for example, if I use my the lead example, for instance, so just say that the sales rep enter a lead, and every time he insert, so the first time he creates the lead, the DSM gets an email, right? Because he created on creation. So that's that case. And on creation, and every time it's edit. So the my sales rep goes in and create the lead, and then it's there before the sales rep, the DSM gets the email alert, but then the sales rep comes in and start editing the lead again. So every time he touches it, it happens. Well, that's not really a good example. But then on the third one, just say we have a different criteria in there. It says, well, if the lead is a certain amount, or we can't put it, or of not a certain amount, but of a certain region, then it'll hit him. So it won't go until the criteria is met. Okay, so on number 3, you have to specify a rule criteria, like what needs to happen before the action takes place. And you need to define the action. And some of the actions you guys mentioned were to create a task and an email alert, update a field on the record itself or the parent record. It does not update related or child records, only the itself or the parent record. And it also, go ahead.
So Mark did throw out their task and outbound messages before he started reviewing this, and Jennifer Lee actually made a good call out that we should probably make note of, and I don't know if you want to maybe emphasize it a little bit later, but the fact that send outbound message we can do here, it's the only action that the process builder cannot do.
Right, right. And I believe Jen Lee, because she does a lot of automation stuff.
Yeah.
She actually should be teaching this class.
There's always part 2 of this session.
Oh,
we'll see what happens.
So, okay, moving on to Process Builder. Process Builder is another tool. It's a more robust, from my understanding, it is a more modern tool. Apparently, it's fairly new. But then again, I'm fairly new, so to me, it's all the same. But Process Builder does a lot more complex if-then statements. So instead of just, if this, then that, it goes if this, then that. If not, then do something else. So it's more, if you have multiple if-then type of scenarios, again, it's another tool to automate process. Process Builder is user-friendly because as compared to the workflow rule where it's just kind of a static page, and you go and you just enter the rules and you select and things like that, doing drop-down menus. Here, it's you get a graphical interface like this. I'm sure a lot of you have seen it. So you have a starting point. You select the object. Let me go back.
And we have Andrew saying here, I'm not starting any rumor, but consider using Process Builder unless you need to send an outbound message. Process Builder is seeing regular updates with each release, but workflow has remained the same for years. And then Jennifer Lee says, I bandwidth workflow rules from being created in my orgs. So she's like, don't do it. Olivia says it also has trouble handling large data volumes. So it looks like we have a bit of consensus there.
What did Jennifer say? I didn't hear.
She bans workflow rules from being created in her org.
Oh, okay. All right. So yeah, I think we're moving away from that too, because I guess it depends on the org, but I'm finding, because I came from a smaller org and then I went to a larger org where there's so many workflow rules that it gets lost. I mean, there's literally, when I was looking in our system, I was like, oh, that's a lot. I mean, you scroll for days looking at all the workflow rules. So what we're doing to clean it up now is we're combining a lot of the workflows into Process Builder. So for example, a few of the flows work on the lead object, and we just evaluate and combine those, and just makes it cleaner, just like what Jen is saying.
Yeah, and so Jen Bowen says basically choose Process Builder over workflow, but it's still there and still a topic on exams, I'm sure. And then Kelsey Shannon says, if a question on the test asks you whether to use workflow rules or Process Builder, always choose Process Builder unless it involves outbound messages. And then Jennifer Lee says, today we had someone who was going to modify an existing workflow rule where we are having him move it to a process. And then Mark says, because workflow can only do one criteria and one action, it definitely doesn't scale as well and solutions that can be more optimized.
Oh, well, see, I actually can skip this slide because you guys know it already. But okay, so let me quiz you guys then on what I've learned and read. So you say that it can't send out an outbound message, right? But I say that it can. How can you do that?
Feel free to unmute your line or use the chat box. Mark says, because workflow can only do one oh, I already read that. Oh, Sumant says Apex.
Yes, Apex. So you can send an outbound message when you create the workflow rule to call on Apex. So yeah, you can basically get rid of workflow. So, and process builder is also time dependent. So that means it's very similar to the workflow in a sense that you can schedule it. I think those are the only two that you can schedule. The others you can't. So,
and Jen Bowen says RIP workflow.
all right. Okay. So, so what about somebody answer this for me then? Where can the updates happen? So on the workflow rule, the update can only happen on the object itself, right? Or the parent. Where can the updates happen on a process builder? Anyone?
Any related object. And then Jennifer Lee says parent, child, or record itself. Sumant, related record.
Mm-hmm.
And then Mark asks, does Process Builder now evaluate the criteria on scheduled actions to make sure it still fits the criteria?
I don't know. That might be a question for Jen Lee.
Olivia says she thinks so. Jennifer Lee says, yep.
Okay then. All right, so moving on. You guys are rocking it. So we're just quizzing here. We don't really. You guys have been doing your homework, you're studying, and I'm just here for the ride. All
it's
right.
called Mission Getting Certified.
All right, process criteria that determines when an action gets executed in groups. So you have various actions that you can do within groups. So that's what that means. It can be scheduled, like I've said before, and also the various action type. It can call Apex. Somebody mentioned that earlier. You can send an outbound message using Apex and other things. Create a record. Can workflow rule create a record? No. Okay. Email alerts. Workflow rule does that. It calls on flows. Post to chatter. It does a quick action, submit for approval. So you can initiate an approval process using the process builder, and it updates a record. So the only thing that's really standing out that's different, well, actually a few things, but creating a record compared to the workflow rules, calling on flows, posting to chatter, quick action, submit for approval. The update is, yeah.
Jennifer Lee says, invoke another process.
Yes, invoke another process. I got a little, I think, was it an acronym for that? So if anybody needs it later. Okay, so some of the process builder action, we spoke about that. And here it is listed here. And so now we're going to move on to an approval process. So in Salesforce, the approval process is the only automated tool that you can use to get approvals. You really can't do it with any of the other tools. So it allows users to specify a sequence of steps that are required to approve a record. Some of the examples are, approving an expense request, and you can do it at different levels. For example, if the request was for $100, it goes to this manager. If it's over $100, then this manager has to approve it, and then another. And I think you can do it on unanimous or sequential approvers, and then you can also reject or deny the request, and certain things will happen, and then you can create actions on that. So what happened once it gets approved, or what happened when it gets rejected.
And Kelsey's asking, can't Process Builder and Cloudflow kick off an approval process?
Yes, it can.
And Jennifer Lee posted, your process can also start based on a platform event, in addition to when a record changes or invoked by a process.
Yes, ma'am. All right. So what else? To create an approval, you need to, some of the actions in an approval process that you can create based on the approval reject is you can create a task, send an email alert, field update on the record itself or the parent record in a master detail relationship only, send outbound message for external systems, and then you can lock and unlock the record using an approval process. Okay, let's see. Any questions on approval process? It's pretty simple. Does anybody use it, and how do you use it in your company?
Yeah, feel free to unmute yourselves. We are not on the YouTube live tonight, so you can unmute and you can speak. You can also type it in the chat box, but we do encourage dialogue. Share with us, how do you use approval processes? Yeah, Jen, I love that. Jen volunteered. Everyone is so shy. If you can unmute to share so Blanca doesn't have to read so much. I agree.
Should I have unmuted to say that instead of chatting?
Yeah, I mean, this is a study group, and I know that it's hard. We were trying, multiple platforms and trying to get that YouTube live working, but yeah, feel free to unmute at any point, guys. I mean, really, that's the way that we learn, right? Sometimes we might miss something. Sometimes you might have a better scenario. Sometimes you can correct us. I mean, this is a learning curve, and we're all in this together.
Yeah, I see. Go ahead.
I understand the approval process. Like, I get it. But I've never actually used it in real life. So I'd love to hear how people are doing that.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, if we can hear you.
We used it in a contract management app, and the manager, one of the managers or several managers needed to approve certain contracts. That's where we used it. So there were several steps for the contract in order for it to being approved.
That's really cool. So are you using Salesforce's approval process or like a third-party contract management?
No. That's specifically set up in Salesforce. The whole app is contract management app. No, it's totally Salesforce.
Neat.
Yeah.
That is neat. And Mark also says, so many of the best lessons I've learned on Salesforce have come from conversation.
Yes. Yeah, I see us as just as a facilitator, so I'm here to learn from you guys as well. We actually use one at our company to when the sales rep go out to their customers, and for example, if it's a new customer, they have to put in a credit application. So they have to submit the information in, and then it goes through like the manager and then the credit department, and then it comes back whether it's approved or not. So if the customer is able to start purchasing, so that's how we do ours. Okay. Next slide. Lightning flow. This one was confusing for me because when the few places that I read, there's so many different names for it. There was a visual flow, lightning flow, cloud flow designer, flow. It was really confusing, and I assume it was all the same thing, and it is to a certain extent. So flow is very similar to the process builder, but it is a lot more powerful in a sense that it could it takes input, and it also queries those input or data. So flow is very powerful, and I heard it described as closest to coding as you can get with a user interface.
And Melissa Hillsdy says, flow is fabulous.
Yeah, I heard that it does take a little bit of, it's not as easy as the process builder, but if you need to gather customer input, or then you definitely go towards Lightning Flow. So now I didn't change
Mark
this.
says he can't wait for the new Lightning Cloud Flow design interface that replaces the current Flash-based tool.
Yeah,
And
it does look kind of not as lightning-y, right?
And Mark had responded earlier before he started talking about flows. He said that he worked with an organization that managed grants, and the grantees would submit reports. An approval process was used for the internal reviewer to alert them a new report had been submitted, and then they could approve it. So that was another example scenario for why you would use approval process, or how.
Yeah, I love to try to create one on my own, but the only time I've used it is on Trailhead. So I've been trying to find scenarios where I can, create those cool apps. But anyway, so Visual Flow is the name of the program. I didn't change it. I'm sorry, Lightning Flow, they changed it. Lightning Flow is the name of the product. Cloud Flow Designer is the actual application, the point and click tool, and then flows is the stuff that you create in that application. So if you guys get confused, that's what it is. Lightning Flow is the product. Cloud Flow Designer is the tool, and Flow is the things that you create in the Cloud Flow Designer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and we have some comments here. Hema says, but I think flows are not easy to create related records. And I'm still in the learning curve trying to understand.
Yeah, flow does seem kind of intimidating. It reminds me of the it looks like the report builder in some instances, but it has, I guess, because of all the coding names on the one of the, I think it was the resource tab, that kind of scared me off the first time I did it.
And
So-
Kelsey said that she's created related records using flows. And there is someone actually who inspired me, not this year, but last year at Midwest Streaming, Rita Leverett. She loves flows. And so if you guys are on Twitter, I would suggest follow her at Rita Leverett. And she does a lot of cool stuff with flows too.
Oh, and then also, if you guys are on Pluralsight, since you have that cool 30-day, I think there is a flow, class on there. The guy that did it, he also did a process builder and some other cool stuff. And he's from Houston, like where I am. So, so this is the Cloud Flow Designer. This here is called the canvas. Right, and so you have the different tabs here. So the Cloud Flow Designer is made up of three things. You have the resource tab, which houses all the stuff that you can add to your flow. Then you have, this is called the palette. You have the Explorer, which shows all the elements and resources. Elements, I think those are the various. Correct me if I'm wrong. There are the variables, right, that holds the data. And the canvas is, again, where all your flows appear.
And Mark had said earlier, you can definitely create related records with the flow, but it's not as easy as Process Builder. It can handle broader scenarios though. And Andrew says flows are great for related records. You just need to capture the ID of the parent when it's created.
Yeah.
And then we have another resource. So Guys, I know some of us are new and this is probably your first call, or some of us may be new to the Google Drive, but you've been on the calls. But please do check the link for our Google Drive because there is a document. It's a Google Sheet and there's multiple tabs on there and we add additional resources. And if you haven't looked there while I'm talking on the topic, and sorry for the interruption, but I just want to remind folks that you can also populate mock questions and you can populate notes for flashcards. So if you haven't looked at Google Drive, go dive in, take a peek and see what's in there, okay?
All right, cool. So like with all the other automation tools, Lightning Flows also have the actions, the things that come out of their criteria. So it can update fields in any record. So like some of you guys said, related or not. Can call in quick actions, query records, loop through records. I think the stuff over here, I kind of aligned it to that thing that only pertains to flow. And the things over here, it can touch on workflow and process builder. So they're very similar to workflow and process builder, some of these things, but this is unique. Well, actually, quick action, you can do that in a process builder too. But the other ones cannot loop, query, have multi-decision points, accept user input. And this, one of the things that I remember when I was taking my advanced admin was the Lightning Flow can delete records. So some of the things that stand out.
And just to make a quick note, Jennifer Lee, thank you so much for bringing this up. Rita Leverett is presenting on a future automation hour, and automationhour.com is an awesome resource. Jennifer Lee and her crew, they host these sessions and they have guest presenters that are experts in all different types of automation tools and great real life scenarios on how they implement it. So there are a whole listing of past recordings on that website. So if anyone wants to dive in deeper on these topics, feel free to visit automationhour.com. And thanks, Jennifer, for reminding me of that.
Thanks, Jen. All right, so here are some of the comparison of the tool is from complexity to more advanced, and what kind of fields they can update: workflow, record or parent, process builder, related records, and visual flow, any records. Some of the unique, I guess I'm gonna give you guys a quiz. All right, I'm gonna move on. 1 second. All right, you guys are ready to unmute yourself and answer some of these questions. So if you know, it just helps out. Okay. When is creating a formula field appropriate?
When we need more coffee.
What?
Just kidding. I'm just trying to wake people up.
When is creating a formula field appropriate? Why is it? What?
It's kind of quiet. Maybe we put everybody to sleep.
I know. All right. Well, I'll skip that one then.
I can give an example.
Great, Sumath. Thank you.
One I can think of is when we know a value has to be based off of a different field. So you could just write a formula of a different field or based off from a field on a parent, for example. So you could just use like contact.email if you want to just show the email of a contact when you already have a lookup to a contact. So let's say contact lookup is the field, But if you also want to show the email, instead of having asking users to enter the email, you could just write contact, whatever the lookup field name dot email, and yep, it just shows the email.
Cool. Thank you for sharing. Okay. What are some of the functions available in a roll-up summary? Anybody know? Some of the functions. There are 4.
Sum, count, min, and max.
Awesome. All right. Okay. What are some of the limitations of a roll-up summary? What can't you do on a roll-up summary?
No average function.
You can't reference a formula that references another object, if that makes sense.
Reference formula that reference another object. No, can you explain that?
So let's say your formula is referencing some fields in a different object. You can't roll it up.
Right.
So
And
you can't use cross-object formulas.
right. And which tool can send an outbound message?
Workflow, rest in peace.
All right. Well,
Or we said Apex, right? Code too.
yeah. But if we didn't use Apex, right? Because then
Right.
You're right. Okay, so which one can delete a record?
Visual.
Flow. Jennifer and Mark say flow. And
Yep.
Hema too.
Okay. Which one can gather input?
Flow.
Jennifer Lee says flow.
All right. Which tool can have a delay start? Like which one can be scheduled?
Process builder. And Mark says process builder and workflow rule. And Jennifer Lee says flow, process builder, and workflow rule. Flow has a wait element. And Melissa says process builder.
Flow has a wait element?
We learned something new again.
Wow, I did not know that because the whole time I was studying, I'm like, there's only 2. Did anybody know that? All right. We learned something new. Which tool can create a record?
Process and flow.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you. So you guys been doing your homework, which is awesome, and it makes my life easier. Okay, Apex variable. Variable is a place in your computer memory that's given a name and it's used to store data. So think of it as a container. If I had to do it visually, so for example, I drive a minivan. In the back of my minivan, you know how you see those little compartment boxes that holds certain things. So I can have each container hold, perishable items, fresh vegetable and fruit. So think of the variable as a container, and then you can just identify it by giving it a name. Let me see, what else? I think in this requirement, we also need to identify what's a constant variable. Now I'll give you an example for that. Oh, wait, before I forget, let's go back to here. The acronym that I remember, so like, remember PVA. P stands for process builder, V stands for visual flow, and A stands for approval. So a process can call on another process. So if you just write PVA on a piece of paper right now, so it's PVA, a process can call on another process. It can call on a visual flow, and it can call an approval process. Where the V is in the middle, it can only call on the approval process, right? And then the A, which is last, it cannot call on anything. So
Thanks for sharing that, because I do always try to look for different ways to keep things memorized in my head. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's what I.
Awesome tip. PVA, great. I like that.
Cool. All right. So a variable is, like I said, it's a place that's saved in memory in your computer. So it makes it run a little bit faster instead of putting a bunch of codes into your system. You actually have a container. Just think about it as a container that you put in your car, to hold different grocery items, just so that it can be, neat and organized. So when you need to get it, you know exactly where to get it, versus having to do a mad scramble in the trunk of your car. Okay, so for example, here I did my variable is here's my this is an example of a variable. So the name is with, the data type is number, and my value is 6. So to instantiate, is that what it means, Blanca? And when you instantiate a variable, that means when you name it, you have to give it a data type, a name, the assignment, which is the equal sign, the value, and you always end each line of code with the semicolon.
And we have a heads up here from Kelsey. Heads up, number isn't a valid variable name.
Right, it's integer.
You have to use integer, double decimal, or long.
Right, yes. So it would be integer. And so Apex variable is in case insensitive. Where was something that we learned today that was case sensitive? Does anybody remember?
Validation rule?
No, it was formula. But yeah, you can have formulas and validation rules. So formulas is where the case it's case sensitive, and Apex variable is case insensitive, and it means it's also strongly typed. For the longest time, when I took my women's rad code class and I was reading all this stuff, it says strongly typed, strongly typed. I'm like, what the heck does that mean? And I've read around it, but what it basically means until I started taking JavaScript. And in JavaScript, when you declare a variable, you put var and then the variable name and equal whatever. Well, in Apex, you don't use the var. var stands for variable in JavaScript. But anyways, you don't use you have to tell it what kind of data type it is. So that's what it means when it is strongly typed. Strongly typed means strongly data type.
So Mark says, oh, they use a bold font when typing?
No, that's just me telling you what to remember. No, it's case insensitive, remember?
Extra clackety on the keyboard. Well, this is great. If we're still joking at this time, you're still up and alive and with us. So great.
Okay, so that's what it means. Strongly typed meaning the data type is identified in the variable. So there's 5 steps that I came up with to declare a variable. First, you specify the data type, which is right here, integer. Give it a name. Here's the name, width and length. Like I said, it's case insensitive, so it doesn't matter, right? Add the assignment, which is the equal sign. Here's my equal sign, and specify the value. Here's 6 and 8, and you cap it at the end with the semicolon. And for the longest time in my Apex class, I couldn't figure out where you put the brackets, the semicolon, and all that stuff. But you know what? If some of you guys don't know Apex, it's okay, because the more you see it, the easier it gets. It's really like learning another language. You don't use it, you lose it. And the more you use it, the easier it gets. So hopefully I'll get more opportunities. But yep. Does that make sense? How you create, how you declare a variable?
Did you want to go over those variable names, no-nos?
Oh, yeah. Okay. I guess some of the things you can't do is you can't have any white space in your variable name, so you can't do this. You can't have characters, and you can't use reserved words. Reserved words are like integer, some of the data type words, and also I think the methods. So you can't call on the words that are reserved by Apex. So which one are they? I don't know. Just Google it and you'll find it. in the Salesforce has a lot of self-help guides, so it's all in there.
And Mark put out something when we mentioned the formula. So when you mention a formula being case sensitive, it's not everywhere in the formula, but in evaluating text, it is case sensitive.
Okay, in evaluating text. Awesome. Thanks, Mark. Okay, what's the difference between constant and like just any of these variable? A constant variable is, if you think of my container, right? So container holds some kind of thing. So just think of a gas can. What do you hold in a gas can? Gas. I'm not going to put milk in there. So it's something that you're never going to hold anything else in there. And so with a constant variable, you declare it that way. So a constant variable, if you think that, I think the word constant variable also comes from an algebra, because I remember teaching my daughter that. But anyways, so constant is a variable whose value does not change after being initialized. And earlier when I said initialize is when you do this stuff, right? Right, Blanca? When you identify the data type, the variable name equals 8, and that's how you initialize it. And also when you initialize a variable, you don't have to give it a value. So
Yeah.
you can just equal null, which means nothing, and just kind of save it. Sometimes, like I said, it's a container. So you're just trying to save this variable for later use. Or you can just leave it like that. So that's another. So later on, you can call it again to give it a value. But basically, variables are just a container that saves space in your computer. Okay, so constant it's defined by the keyword final, and no, it doesn't have to be all caps either. So an example of that is, for example, here the decimal, which is, so final is the keyword, decimal is the data type, pi is my variable name, the equal sign is what, guys? There's a name for that.
The assignment.
Yes. And what is this number here? What is it called?
The value?
Yes, ma'am, the value. All right. You're
Who
good to
was
go.
that?
Sorry, Jen Bowen.
Oh, hi, Jen. Okay. I just want to become familiar with people's voices, so thank you.
Okay, so next is an expression. Expressions are building block in the code. So expressions are made up of variables, operators, method invocations that evaluate a value. So expression can be literal, like this, 1 plus 1, or it could, the expression can be on an L, what I learned from an L value. An L value is, for example, it can be, an expression can be anything to the left of the equal sign is considered an L value. So this is an expression, right? But it has to, for example, like my list, that's an expression. So you don't even have, it could be to the left of the equal sign, and that makes it the L value. Integer equals I. And when you see, like, expression can be a SQL query. So it's surrounded by brackets, like the square brackets. And those are expression ways, what they're made up of: variable, operators, and method invocation. Okay, good on that? Okay, Apex data types. I did not put a lot of detail on this just because there's a lot of documentation on Salesforce and the different data types, but we can give examples of them. There's two types of data types. There's primitive and there's complex. You have, these are the primitive, the blob, which example of that are attachments. Boolean is the true false type of data. So if you go back to this slide right here, right? So how do you declare a variable? Give it a data type, which is one of these. Give it a name. So for example, let's declare this data type. Date, let me see. Apple equal. And from what I understand, if you're giving it a date, you don't give it like a string text. You have to give it the actual value. The actual value has to match the data type. Does that make sense? So data type, variable name, assignment, and then the value. And the value has to match the data type. So you got
I think you're making us all hungry. We're talking in the chat box about cereal and bourbon pecan pie, and now you're talking about apples, and I'm like, if there's an apocalypse, I want to be with Kelly in her minivan because she's got the fruits and veggies.
Maybe that's what it is. Date time is the date, and then it's dinner. I don't know. Anyway, just kidding. But anyway, so you guys get it. A date time is like a timestamp. Decimal is when you want your values to be in decimal form, like dollars and currency and things like that. Double is the same as a decimal, except I think this is 32-bit and this is 64-bit. So that means it's just longer. It's very similar to what is it? I think it was the string and the long. So the string has so many characters, and this one has so many. I guess they call it bit. So, but that's what it means. It's just a little bit longer, a little bit more room. So, anybody have any questions or any tips on primitive data types and how you use them?
I just want to add, I think long is for numbers.
Oh, that's right. Long numbers. Right.
Yeah. So you group together the decimal and double and integer and long, and basically just remember that the decimal and integer are the short ones, and then double or longer if you need a really long number.
I must have gotten it confused with on the field in Salesforce. What was it? Long text and short text?
Yeah, that is what it's called.
But long here is numbers, correct?
I say correct.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. All right, cool. Okay, so then that's the primitive, and here's the complex. You have complex consists of some collections. Collections are data types that have more than one element. So for example, here, let's do the time. So if I did the time and I give the time, I can only give one time. The value has to be only, the value is the element, you can only assign one. Here with a collection, like a list and a set and a map, those are collections. You can assign multiple elements or values to them. And I gave you some clues here. List on. So a list is ordered and it's not unique, non-unique. So if you think of, okay, so if I put, I'm gonna use food again, because I think, what was that site, Blanca, that had all the fruit in the container?
Oh, that was Women Code Heroes.
Right, Women Code Heroes. So that she had a container on there with all the different fruit. So if you had it in, if it lined up like an apple, banana, orange. So non-unique meaning you can have 2 oranges in there and it doesn't care, right? But it has to be, the position has to be correct. So the position, whatever position it's in, it's going to remember that position. So if you had a banana in the position 1 or 0 and another banana in position 1, then it doesn't care if you have duplicate. It cares like when it calls on position 0, it's a banana. On position 1, it's a banana. Position 2, it's an apple or something like that. So ordered means it goes in order, and non-unique meaning it can have duplicates. Where it's set, so list on and set, I don't know, you. But the set is unordered and it's unique. So you cannot have duplicate values in a set. But it doesn't really matter where the position is. So you can have, it anywhere, and it doesn't look for it in the position.
And for those folks that are new to the resources, Women Code Heroes is a blog that was started by Karen Jameson, who is one of the founders of Rad Women Code. And I shared it on our kickoff slide and probably a few other of our week's resources page towards the end of our presentation. So if you're in the Google Drives, you can find it there. We also added it to the list in Google Sheets under the resources tab. So if you want to find the website that we're referring to, look there, and I'll drop it into the chat box as well.
Okay. So did that, the list and the set make sense? Because it took me a while when I first learned it, like how to figure out which was what and which one did what. But if you just remember list on and set 2, set U, I don't know. But the set is unordered and unique, and list is ordered and non-unique.
And Mark had put in some stuff a little bit earlier. He says, best bet for assigning a date variable is using a function to make it easier to assign. He says, so like date, my perfect date equals date dot new instance, and then in parentheses 2000 comma 4 comma 25.
Good tip. Okay. So the next collection is a map. Map are made up of what they're called keys and values. So it's basically the keys are the set and the values are the list. So the values are ordered and non-unique, where the keys are. So when would you use this? For example, you would reference like an account ID, an account name, and an account ID. So which one would be ordered and which one would be unordered, right? So it depends on, I guess the set would probably be ordered, which is the account ID, and then the value would be the account name. So that's how that's used. And then other complex data types are enum. This one, to me, I didn't really understand it, but I think it was also a collection of values too, right? Does anybody know? Because I read it and I'm like, what?
I don't remember that one, but I'm trying to see if I can find anything. But if anybody is familiar with enum, please do feel free to unmute or type it in the chat box.
Enumeration is when you can have a variable increment by 1, I think. So you would enum, a count, and it would increment by 1.
Oh. So I read somewhere that you can set the enum to a constant variable, like it would never change.
Then it would be like, I think in that case, and I'm not sure 100%, but it would be like if you have, you're talking about your list, like banana equals 1 and apple equals 2. And so you would have a variable or a name that would be that integer value. So, but it's hard to say. It's hard for me to describe it, but it's,
No, I get it, because that one was a little like, I was trying to find use cases for it. That helps me learn a lot better. But I don't know. I haven't really heard or seen a lot of people that I know have used it.
So Mark has added, enum is like a list that you supply from the beginning. Enum, seasons, and then winter, spring, summer, fall.
So when you describe it at the beginning, so it doesn't change, right? So it's kind of like a constant variable then?
It's a static list Kelle added. You can't change it after you set it.
Ah, so it is kind of like a constant, right? Yeah. Sounds like that.
Yes,
Yeah.
Mark says yes.
Awesome. And then you have your S object, which are the objects or like the accounts and the campaigns and the contacts. Those are the complex data type. And then class object, I don't know. Actually, I don't know what that is. So like I said, I was doing this the last 20 minutes. So if anybody know what a class object or when you use that, I would love to hear your explanation.
Yeah,
I'll add to that. It's a little bit confusing, but basically your Apex class is an object. That's just how Salesforce refers to it.
Your Apex class is an object.
So all the code you write becomes an object. That's how it's referred.
Oh, so the classification. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, super confusing. That one stumped me as well.
And we didn't cover that a whole lot in the Rad Women course class, Kelle. We just touched on it a little bit.
Right.
So that's probably
right. But I do remember that class is like a classification of, like a human type, dog type, or a classification of an object or something like that. I remember that vaguely, but just trying to use it, like I said, it's kind of foreign to me just because I don't use that language on a daily basis.
Yeah, but just basically all the code you write, like in a single file, for example, that's called a class, and you can have like the outer class is the container for the entire piece of code, and then you have inner classes that are more specific, and then the whole thing is an object.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much for sharing that, because that makes a lot of sense.
And Mark, he has us laughing over here. So if you hear me giggling over here, Kelle, it's not at you. It's because there's a lot of laughter going on in this chat area. But he says, yes, you can make a variable from a custom class. And then he gives, so if you make a class called toasters, you can create a variable to represent an instance of a toaster.
Okay.
Yep, and then your class store can reference the toaster class.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks so much, guys, for sharing. And I think that brings us to the end of our study session. Blanca, take it away.
Yeah, so I'm just going to add on in here because I know he doesn't have a mic, but Mark says if I made a toaster class, I could have a variable that's my little toaster or another one named my big toaster. And then he says really important on complex data types. They can be made of other data types. So that's another note for us.
No, that's
including.
right. Yeah, because for example, like that's what I remember. So, for example, you with the list, you can have different other types, data types within the list and the set and the map and all that stuff. So, you can have you can have an integer in there. You can have the date in there. So it doesn't have to be any particular one. So it's just exactly what Mark said.
Yeah, and he says including complex data types like have a list of accounts.
Awesome.
Or a map of IDs, key, and accounts values.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, everyone. I learned a lot from putting this together, and also I'm thankful that you guys were to chime in and speak up. I learned from everybody, and I appreciate that. I hope that we continue that going forward. And also, if you are up to the challenge, but maybe not the whole course, Blanca. Maybe we can split it up. But this was a real challenge. I mean, this week has been kind of crazy for me. And then when Blanca and I hooked up on Tuesday just to get all this stuff out, I've actually read all this stuff before, but just having to redo it over and trying to present it it just makes you kind of reinforce what you learned. So I hope I did a good job and that you got something out of it.
And Andrew said, I put this in the resources back on week 1, but here it is again. And he includes the link for Women Code Heroes. So check in the chat box, and it's in our Google Docs. I would like to say, first and foremost, thank you so much, Kelle, because I know that it is a lot, and it can be done. We're busy. We are working full time and we have kids and managing daily life. But you know what? This is important to us. And thank you all for being on the call and for keeping up with the homework and staying steady on Twitter and staying steady on our Slack workspace. Those are the channels that we look at to keep communication going along. And actually, so this is great. I didn't even have to ask, but we have Kelsey who said, I volunteer as tribute for week 4.
Awesome.
Great. We all just pitch in here and there and we help each other, move forward along in the process. And that's what we're here for, to help encourage people. And, there's no need to be scared. We are all learning together. There's no right and wrong questions. Ask as many as you like. We're really here just to learn together and pass that certification exam. I'm just reading the chat box to see. There's a lot of thank yous, amazing sessions. Oh, Hema says thank you. Thank you guys for being here. You don't have to thank me at all. I mean, really, I just like Kelle said, I'm learning with and from each and every one of you. And, that's the best thing, because a lot of you have way more experience, way more certifications than I do, and have been using Salesforce for much longer than I have. And, I hope that I can give back in some way, and then maybe some newbie comes along and joins our group, and, we can help them along as well. So we just move forward together.
So we don't have class next week, correct?
Correct. So can you actually just advance one more slide?
Oh, there's another one?
Okay, there it goes. This one with the schedule. So Kelly's right. We have a Forcelandia event that's big, and I know that quite a few folks here were studying for the platform developer one, and some people are trying to go to that conference because that is the Salesforce conference that's all about development. So when we first kicked off this session, we decided we would not meet for next week. So you did not get a calendar invite for next week. What you did get from me shortly before this session kicked off today was an invite that covers what will be our week 4 of content, which is part 2 of logic and process automation, and that we will reconvene August 16th. From August 16th till the very end, we meet consecutively, so we do not have any breaks in weeks. We'll hit up those last 4 weeks back to back to back. And so, yes, if anyone who's going to Forestlandia, drop by Charlie's session. So Charlie's actually one of the founders of Ladies Be Architects, and she'll be presenting there. You know, Gemma and her have been really busy and trying to encourage people and trying to spread the wealth of knowledge that this group exists, and we're here to help all, and we will all work together to move up that pyramid. So if you are there, drop by the session. If you did not receive the calendar invite for the remaining weeks, please just shoot me an email. For those of you who have in Slack or have not been on the Google Drive, please check out those resources, because that's how we're staying in communication in between our sessions that we meet live. And there was one other thing I wanted to mention. Oh, for those of you that requested the 30-day free pass for Pluralsight from Don Robbins, I think I caught up with all the requests that came in. I sent out like 3 or 4, probably about 20 minutes before this session started. So if you submitted a request and you do not have a personalized email from me, please reach out to me at blanca@arcladies.com. And then I'll make sure to send that out again. And for those of you that are new and you don't know what it is, I'll just give a pretty brief overview. Don Robbins was very impressed with our study group, and he had an excellent additional bonus resource for us. He has classes on Pluralsight, and so do many other experts. I know that Kelly mentioned David Liu, and there's Matt and a whole bunch of other folks that have courses on there. And so what Don did was he created these 3 channels that have topics that may touch on what we're learning for this certification. These courses are not intended to guarantee that we pass the certification, or they're not intended to use as coursework specifically for the certification. What these courses are additional real life, breaking it down to what it is that we don't know, that we should know, and best practices. And they walk through real life business scenarios. So if you're new to hearing about this and you would like to request one of the free passes to access Pluralsight for 30 days, please shoot me an email and I will get you what you need. And so I'll open it up to see if anyone has any last minute questions. We will continue process automation for our next session. We split it up in 2 because I think it weighs about 46% of this exam, which is a lot. So we wanted to make sure we have adequate time to cover everything. Okay, Hema, I'll make a note for you. If anyone has any questions about content from today, or any suggestions for studying that you need, or anything, you know, don't feel like you have to hold back. We're here to support each other in any way possible.
Blanca, Sumant here. Quick clarification regarding the Pluralsight. So while since we have so many resources that we are already looking at least in the resources section of the file right now, can we start using the 30-day of Pluralsight at a later date in future?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the way that it works is from the time you actually redeem it is when the 30 days counts. So if you haven't already redeemed that code that I sent you when you requested access to a pass, you can save that. You can hold on to that for later in the future whenever you want, and that is by all means not a requirement for our study group. That's just, he just said, hey, I saw you got this group going on. Maybe you guys might like access. And for me, it's all about bring me all the resources that we can get. And, it's not mandated. You do not have to do it. And yes, you can hold on and redeem it at a later time.
Thank you.
No problem.
One follow-up question, not to that specific one, but since there are like tons of resources out there, is there anything that stands out that anybody thinks we should start with, and which is absolutely something that is definitely going to cover pretty much all the, not just for the PD1 exam, but as a as somebody who wants to be a good Salesforce developer?
Yeah, great point. So let me just say here, before I forget, in the chat box, Mark said there's a lot of great materials for getting hands-on with Apex from David Liu, and lots of topics that are really great for architecture from Don Robbins and others. What I will say, I'll just reiterate, I think we talked about this last session. Definitely for this certification, and not just for the certification, but as kind of a starting point, I would say start with the basics of completing the Salesforce Trailhead. There's a trail mix that is specific for Platform Developer 1. That's a great basic kind of entryway in. I would agree with Olivia. She shared some of the resources that we've already shared. Women Code Heroes breaks a lot of, breaking into Apex and understanding these concepts really nicely, in the sense that the way that they articulate examples, it's not really, you have to be very tech savvy to understand it. I mean, they get down to the layman's kind of terms way of articulating these concepts. And so I definitely would say look at Women Code Heroes. It's a free blog, awesome topics on there. David Liu's SFDC 99, which we mentioned earlier in this class, and on a few other ones. He has great resources like getting started with Apex, and also in certifications, and also if you want to look at careers. Yeah, so with the trail mix, there is quite an amount of time that you need to spend on it. What I would say is, do what you can do. To be honest, it's hard when you're, managing work, managing life, and trying to get through this. So I don't want to say you have to allocate X amount of time and get X amount done every week. I think we all have to do what works best for us, and you have to keep your goals small and attainable, right? Because if we set a goal that's extreme and we don't hit it, we're just setting ourselves up for failure. And I will let you know that for me, I got to take it one goal at a time. So maybe my goal is, okay, if I can get 2 badges in 1 week, great. If there's a week that I know my workload is a little bit less, or I'll have childcare a little bit more, then I may say that week I may aim for a little bit more. But do what you can do. Take it one day at a time. And reach out. Look out on Twitter. I know there's a lot of us that are completing different Trailhead modules. See what each other are doing, and if you get stuck on something, don't hesitate to reach out on the Slack workspace. I mean, someone's always looking at it. I will admit, since I started the new job, it's a little hard during the day, but I try to keep an eye on it in the evening, and we have a lot of study buddies in our big group that are on there throughout the day and even on the weekends. So do what you can. I would say focus on the trailhead, focus on the Women Code Heroes, focus on David Liu's SFDC 99. And if and when you have time, look at those channels that Don Robin put together for us.
Hey, Blanca.
Mm-hmm.
He was talking about, like, he was asking about the developer. I mean, there's a lot of resources out there, and I think sometimes for a lot of us who are newer, things like that, it's just you can get scatterbrained and go down another rabbit hole. But one of the thing that I found that I would like to work through, because there's an Apex workbook. If you Google it, it's I don't remember how many, but it's there's a workbook that it's a step-by-step. So it goes through teaching you Apex, and of course use all the reference that Blanca mentioned to supplement it. But I think that the workbook is about 87 pages, and it's put out by Salesforce.
I believe the workbook has been
Decommissioned.
Yeah, it has been taken down, and when I clicked the link from some blog on Salesforce about the workbook, it took me to say to go to Trailhead is their new workbook or something.
Yeah, it was decommissioned and now it's on Trailhead. But if for me, sometimes I like something in my hand because I don't, I kind of want to write notes and stuff like that. But I do have a copy of it, so if anybody who's interested.
I actually found one. It's a little bit older. So you're right. Sumat, they are transferring a lot over to Trailhead and pointing people there. Oh, and it looks like Lori found the same one that I did. So it's from 2016.
Right. That's the one.
Yeah, so some of the images may look different, but I think that for the foundation of the context, even though this is a little bit dated, it's probably going to provide a good resource to start with. And then as you do the trailheads and when you get to some of these other resources, you'll probably be able to identify what's new and what's up to date and changes that they've made since. So great, Kelly. Thank you so much for bringing that up.
Yeah. Thanks, Laurie and Blanca, for that. I think this is going to really help me.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Yeah, so if anyone else has any pressing questions, feel free to ask now or forever hold your peace until our next session or until you find us on Slack and on Twitter and so forth.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I'm going to sign off because I got to go feed those 4 kids now.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Kelly.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye, everyone.